Afternoon, everybody. My name's Mark Payne. I'm a superintendent for West Midlands Police. I'm in charge of operational policing in a city called Wolverhampton, which is not far from here. About 230,000 people, and I deliver policing to that city. I've been a user of social media for some time now, and what I'll do during the course of the talk is I'll just take you through some of the history of how we use social media, some of the things that are threats and that we recognise as difficulties to policing. I'll give you some case studies of where I've used social media during real life public order situations, and then just end with a summary of my thoughts in terms of some good practice. Please don't let me just blather on for half an hour. If you've got any questions, pop your hand up in the air and I'll happily stop and take questions, and I'll take questions at the end. Without further ado then, this chap here, his name is, or was, Alan Harris, and he was a burglar, and he was caught burgling some flats by some other burglars, and the burglars murdered him over a period of about 4 hours. And I was charged with investigating that murder. This was in 2008. They weren't the best criminals. They videoed the murder on their mobile phones, and I thought that was probably a clue. So I tried to get hold of a copy of that murder, that piece of phone footage. So I asked one of my detectives to go onto the internet and have a look around and see if they could find some footage of this murder anywhere on the internet. And they went away and they came back and they said, I can't get onto the internet, I'm blocked. So I then thought, well, I'm a senior officer, so I'll have a go, and I couldn't get on either, and I was blocked. And in actual fact, you couldn't get on the internet at all in West Midlands Police in 2008. You were completely blocked. And we are the second biggest police force in the country. So, you know, it's a significant barrier, you might think, to information sharing and all that kind of stuff. So shortly after that, I used all my detective skills. They moved me to be head of corporate communications, and I really hadn't got very much of a clue about communication, so I thought, well, I'll have a go at doing something with social media then. So we did lots of fairly standard stuff that you'll recognise throughout your own organisations. We set up a Facebook site. We've got a channel where we display videos, which we call PCTV, which is based on a YouTube platform. We've got Twitter accounts, that's mine. We've got a helicopter on Twitter. We've got police officers, and we've got police dogs and other such things. We've been accused of being a bit gimmicky, putting police dogs and the helicopters on Twitter. My answer to that is always it's about building a followership. It's about getting people to follow you. And albeit these might be gimmicky platforms, actually when you need to say something, it's no good saying it if nobody's listening to you. So we have taken a very deliberate course of getting some of these gimmicky accounts so that people follow us, so that when something happens, there's somebody listening to our message. We do Ask the Commander sessions over the internet, so we set a commander up and we live stream them and they take questions. That's one of our PACT meetings in Wolverhampton. For those who don't know, PACT is a police and community meeting. Normally they're held in scout huts and school halls, and about 10 people turn up if you're lucky on a cold Thursday night. So we thought we'd try and do this over the internet, and we've got about 250 people to participate in this meeting, and so we've carried on doing it since then. But it's much more successful in terms of reaching the public than we've found with some of our traditional meetings. These are the platforms we use. I'm sure that none of them need any introduction to you, but that's what we've chosen to focus on. And obviously, as the internet and social media expands, then we will look at new sites as they pop up. Okay, I just want to talk a little bit about general threat and risk that social media poses to policing, and I understand most of you in the room deal with emergency planning, crisis situations, that type of thing. I expect most of these you can extrapolate them out to your organisation to some degree or other. So Tiger Woods and Michael Jackson, there is a link between them, in as much as they were the two biggest events ever to hit the sort of web, the internet. They're the two biggest, most talked about events: Michael Jackson's death and Tiger Woods' car crash. Those of you who remember Tiger Woods' car crash, that story was told on social media in about 10 minutes. So, crashes his car, his wife hits him with a golf club, allegedly. All that was sort of told on social media within about the first 10 minutes or so. This was before CNN got their helicopter in the sky and before it had broken on the news. That whole story was out of the bottle. It was all told, and people were starting to form conclusions, you know, almost immediately after it had happened. Michael Jackson, when he died, that story was obviously broken on the internet. And again, you know, the story in terms of overdose and all that type of stuff was told really quickly after the event happened. The significant for the police and for emergency and crisis situations is that if you just bring that down to a local level, my job when I turn up at a crime scene is to gain control of that crime scene. So I've got to capture witness statements, I've got to stop people walking over my scene, I need to understand what my witnesses are going to be saying, I need to see if there's any CCTV, and I need to do all of that in a sterile environment, because I might have to use all of this evidentially at court at a later date. Now all of that was really easy when I first started some time ago, but now it's increasingly difficult, because what we describe as the golden hour in terms of the first hour after an incident, where we do most of our evidence gathering, is now very difficult to control, because a lot of it's done digitally. So if we have a crime scene, people will turn up with an iPhone and they'll video the crime scene. So that's my crime scene that I want to control, that's now captured on somebody's video. They'll update Facebook or Twitter, or they'll do a piece to their camera and they'll post it. So that might be my first eyewitness who I need to get in an evidential format. They might be telling their first witness account to 10,000 people over the internet. I don't control that. In terms of CCTV footage, again, people post that online. It's beyond my control. That means that in terms of having to control witness viewings and identification and a whole host of things that I used to be able to control really easily, I'm now really struggling to gain control of them. And you know, policing as a whole has not really got to grips with this properly, and you know, we are facing some real challenges. We've had rape victims named on Twitter, which is against the law, but people do it anyway. We've have Facebook crime reported to us every 40 minutes. I expect that's now out of date. They seem to come in thick and fast. Again, we haven't really got brilliant processes for dealing with this. It's new business to us. We've got police officers on Twitter, lots of them, which is great, except sometimes they say daft things. This was not my police force, but another police force who built an app, and the app had lots of buttons they could press to update people with what they were doing. So, you know, there's a button to say I'm on patrol in the high street, a button to say, you know, I'm at a community meeting or a crime scene. This PC pressed the button that says there was a plane crash in the city centre by accident. Quite why that button was on there, I don't know. But this started a mass panic, which they needed then to try and put right. So, you know, we're making some headway in this area, but it is posing us lots of new challenges. Anonymous, you may or may not have heard of Anonymous. They are anonymous. They are a group of hackers who make it their job to undermine lots of social constructs and government departments. This is an example where they gained access to a phone call between the FBI and some counter-terrorism officers talking about terrorism activity, and they posted that online. Again, real threat to police, and how on earth do we deal with that? You know, cross sort of globe communications. It's above and beyond our capacity at the minute. Covert policing. Covert policing, it's not a secret that we use covert police officers. We use police officers and dress them up as other people and tell them to go and live in a community and pretend to be a criminal to integrate themselves with other criminals. That's all well and good until you reach the point that we've reached recently, where we've got a crime group in Australia who have been convicted of videoing police passing out ceremonies, so that they've got all the officers' faces on a database, so that they can then scan any new entrants to their group against that database using facial recognition software. So all of a sudden, you know, what we consider to be a fairly safe process becomes extremely difficult, because there are very few people who won't have a photograph of themselves posted somewhere on the internet, be it a school photograph, or you know, you go to a family wedding and they put the photographs on the internet, totally beyond your control. But of course your covert identity and your real identity are all available on the internet, and that's extremely difficult. The student protests, for those of you who remember a couple of years back, there was a big protest in London. It all got out of hand. It all went a bit wrong. The students built an app to deal with the police tactics on that day. They call the app Suki. We use a technique called kettling in the police, and this was Suki, take the kettle off, probably put the kettle on. And what they did was they had students at strategic points around London, and they just asked the students to update the app with the movements of police officers and police horses, police barricades, so that they were preventing the police from actually kettling them or containing them in any one area. And the whole day was a bit of a disaster for the police. They were a bit undone by this app. You know, and these are the kind of things that are starting to pose significant difficulties to the way that we've policed, you know, for probably the last 30, 40 years. All of a sudden, a lot of our tactics are being challenged in ways that we are just not sort of able to counter at the minute. The chap in the middle with the white shirt on, he's Officer Bologna. He was the police officer in charge of dealing with the Occupy New York protests, and he's the officer who gave the command to mace spray the protesters to move them out of the way of the protest. The protesters were not overly pleased at being mace sprayed, and so what they did was they blew up the photograph that you've just seen there, and they posted that online, Bologna. And then our friends at Anonymous picked that up, and they said, well, what do we know about Officer Bologna? Please come back and tell us. And what they got was a list of Officer Bologna's relatives, which they posted online. They got a list of addresses for Officer Bologna and his relatives, which they posted online. And they went on to post online details of children's schools and, you know, a whole host of other things that obviously Officer Bologna would not have wanted in the public arena. It's a really significant issue that we've got to find a way of dealing with, because clearly we want police officers and public officials to be public facing. We want people to know who we are so they can talk to us. But that does present the risk that people will use social media to significantly undermine the way that we go about doing our business. And finally, social media obviously has been used in terms of the Arab Spring significantly by the protesters and by some of the groups to get their messages out and to promote their cause and to sort of organise themselves. So we've seen social media being used across the whole spectrum of sort of crime and public life, up to and including government change. So significant challenges to policing that have really only come about in the last 4 or 5 years that we are struggling to keep up with. Okay, so now I've cheered you all up. Case studies. I'm just going to take you through a couple of case studies where I have used social media in crisis situations or public order situations. So the first happened when I was head of corporate communications. We had a group called the English Defence League who were planning to protest in Dudley, which is a town on the outskirts of the West Midlands. The English Defence League, for those who don't know, they're a far right wing group who have some views that lots of people don't necessarily agree with. And wherever they go, there's a counter-protest held by another group called Unite Against Fascism, who sit on the opposite side of the sort of political spectrum. And traditionally, whenever they get together, there's a bit of a fight and disorder. And we'd seen that in a couple of locations before they came to Dudley. One of the things that we learned from the police forces who had dealt with previous protests was that the group were using social media messages to incite violence against each other. So they were posting false messages on the internet to promote sort of violence and disorder amongst their supporters and to try and promote disharmony between the two groups. So I was charged with coming up with a bit of a strategy to use social media to counter that. So the first thing that we did was we agreed that I would start to talk to some of the big social media users in Dudley, so that I'd got somebody in Dudley who had already got a good following, who I could sort of talk to and build a rapport with. And I ended up talking to probably a group of about 20, 30 people in Dudley over the internet, over Twitter, just about day-to-day policing business, so that I'd got a relationship and they trusted my voice and they knew that I was a police officer and I wasn't just somebody pretending to be a police officer. So that on the day of the protest, when I started saying, "Hi, I'm Mark, I'm from the police," and people didn't know whether I was or not, I'd got some people from Dudley who could authenticate my message and who could stand up and say, yeah, he actually is from the police and I've been talking to him previously. So on the day, we did indeed have these messages posted. Muslims attack anti-mosque protesters. That wasn't true. Post on Facebook and Twitter saying a man from the EDL has been killed in fighting between the EDL and Muslims. Anyone else seen this? EDL supporter killed by Muslims at Dudley. A message that he was run down and killed by a car. None of these were true. They were all absolutely made up. And there were lots more of them. But I didn't know at that point that I was going to be doing a speech on it, so I didn't capture them in a screen grab. These are the ones I can find. So all the time that these were going on, I was following the hashtag that they used on Twitter to go back into their feed and say, "Hello, I'm from the police. That's not true. Nobody's been killed. No mosques have been attacked. We've not had anybody stabbed. We've not had any supporters rushed." And all the messages that were coming out all day long, I was talking to our command suite to make sure of the facts, and then going back into their streams and saying that's not true, and appealing for calm, and answering any questions that they had, and making sure that they weren't surprised by anything that we were doing. And that worked reasonably well. We got some good feedback on the back of that. I wrote a blog about it afterwards, and that was the first time that had been done at the time in the UK, and since that we've used that in West Midlands and across the country on a number of occasions to sort of deal with public order situations. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the riots. As I say, I was in charge of operational policing in Wolverhampton when we had some riots, and because I was a social media user, I used social media throughout the day to deal with some of the rumours, which I'll go into in a while. Just to say that when I landed at Wolverhampton, one of the first things that I did was I invited some of the big social media users into Wolverhampton to talk to me. So some of the hyperlocal blogs, some of the people who, were sort of prominent in the area, I invited them in to have a chat about how we could do business together. Would they like my beat sergeants to write messages for their hyperlocal blogs? Would they like a monthly column from me talking about policing? What did they want from the police? So I built some relationships early on with the people who were influential on the social media scene in Wolverhampton. If I just take you through the riots, the riots built up over a weekend in August. So they started in London. On the Friday, they cascaded into the Saturday and the Sunday, and all that weekend I was at work preparing because we thought that there was a significant danger of them spilling over into the West Midlands. They did in Birmingham start over that weekend, and so we were preparing in Wolverhampton for there to be some disorder, because we've had disorder in Wolverhampton before. and we knew that there was some tension in the area. So what I spent a lot of the weekend doing was listening to what people were saying, and just getting some messages of reassurance out to the people of Wolverhampton that actually, we hadn't got any disorder at that point, that I would update them if any disorder started, but that actually Wolverhampton was safe. All weekend really, I spent a lot of time on Twitter and posting on Facebook and other people's Facebook sites, messages of reassurance, because people were seeing buildings on fire in London. People were genuinely scared to go out. They were getting very bad messages that were posted on Facebook and Twitter, and I thought it was important that we challenge those and get facts out as quickly as we could. And you see there, WV11 is one of our hyperlocal sites. What they were doing was picking up my messages. They were, when rumours were passed to them, they were asking me if they were true or not, and then they were posting my replies. So they were effectively the voice of their community, asking me questions, and I was answering their questions at and around the time. That was the view from my helmet at about 4 o'clock on the Monday afternoon, because the riots started in Wolverhampton, and we had some really significant disorder. Now, one thing of note is that I'd got it quite badly wrong at this point, because I was using Twitter to update Wolverhampton, but actually I was also in charge of trying to put in place an operational response to the riots, which made it a little bit difficult, to be honest with you, because it's difficult to stand when people are throwing bricks at your head with an iPhone telling people what's going on. So a bit of learning from me there, and we've now changed our system around that, and I've now got our control room on social media so that we can get messages out through a constant line of communication rather than relying on me, because I found myself having to carry out both roles. I was tweeting throughout the disorder, just updating people, saying, it's probably not a good idea to come into Wolverhampton at the minute. We've got disorder. We're trying to keep it under control, keep it out of this area. Those tweets were retweeted. So somebody's done some metrics who's much better at this stuff than me, but they reckon it reached about 300,000 people over the course of the sort of riot and the day afterwards. I'm not entirely sure how they know that, but that's what they've told me. But given that everything that I was doing was being retweeted lots and lots and lots of times, my tweets were posted as banner headlines on Sky News, so they were running across the bottom of the screen 2 minutes after I'd posted them. So there was a lot of people listening to what was saying. And the feedback that we had after the riots was that the community felt that they were being updated by the police, and they were very grateful for the reassurance that we were able to give them, and that they were able to counter some of the rumours that were started. That's a picture of a chap jumping on a police car. He was arrested shortly after that by the officer who was driving that police car, who wasn't best pleased. 3. Right. The reason 3 is significant is I'm told by academics that 3 is a number of different sources you need to hear a piece of information from before you believe that piece of information. And once you believe it, it takes a lot more persuading to disbelieve it. So if you think back, 5 years ago, you'd have had to watch BBC News, you'd have read The Sun or The Times or whatever the next day, and you might have picked something up via local communications. But now you can receive information from 3 different sources within the space of 5 minutes, easily. So the point of that is that, as soon as rumours start, somebody needs to be listening out for them so they can challenge them and counter them and get some fact out. Because once people believe a rumour, it's very, very difficult to counter that belief. We had in Wolverhampton for a whole week stories that one of our city centre, out of city centre areas had burnt down, that someone had been shot. These were all things that we were challenging, but people, once it gets a grip, it's very hard to persuade people that it's not true. These are all stories that people were led to believe were true, none of which were. So London Zoo had animals released and tigers running down the high street. people cooking their own food in McDonald's. I know that's not true. Police beat a 16-year-old girl. London Eye set on fire. Rioters attack a children's hospital in Birmingham. Army deployed in a bank, and Miss Selfridge set on fire. I'm told that Miss Selfridge, one of them was set on fire, but it wasn't that one. So you can see, you know, that all these were things that were started on social media. None of them were true, but all of them would have affected public behaviour. All of them would have affected the way that people chose to move around, chose to react on the day that the riots were ongoing. None of them were counted because clearly at the time, you know, the Met and other police forces had got other things to worry about. But, you know, how much did that worry people and concern people and affect people's behaviour? And in any crisis situation, what people want is an authoritative voice, somebody to tell them what's going on, where they can go, where they can't go. You know, and if they don't get that from the authority, then they'll believe whatever they see. And it takes some time to persuade them not to believe it afterwards. You probably can't read these, but it's just a sort of list of my tweets on the day. So, persistent rumours that need stopping. Nothing's happened at Bentley Bridge, that's the out-of-town shopping centre. Nobody's been shot in Wolverhampton. Number of arrests, there's not been a shooting in Bilston. 20 arrests in Wolverhampton. Lots of offers of help from people to identify offenders and people wanting to post photographs to my Twitter account for me to say that's my next door neighbour and he's a rioter. You know, so really significant volume of messaging throughout the day and the days that followed. And then this is just, we used social media afterwards to try and bring the return to normality. So for days afterwards, I was tweeting messages and those messages were being picked up and shared by other platforms in Wolverhampton to convince people it was safe to come out of the house, that Wolverhampton wasn't a charred wreck, and that you know we were back to normality. Okay, I'm just going to have a sip of water. So considerations. There's just my thoughts on, you know, if I was starting again, or you know, what would I do? What would I advise people to do to be ready for crisis, either planned or pre-planned crisis situations? The first is obvious, but practice in peacetime. So, you know, you're not going to learn social media when, you know, somebody's chasing you down the road with a big stick. If you're not talking to people before the event, then nobody's going to be listening to you when you actually need them to during the event. Nobody's going to trust your voice. Other police forces have had issues with people impersonating them. So during public order events, somebody popping up and claiming to be from that police force. You know, and the only reason they're able to do that is because that police force hasn't occupied that space in their own right, and people were able to step into that space. So practice in peacetime. Make sure that people are aware that you're out there, and that people, you know, are happy to receive your messages. Get yourself a hashtag. If you're planning an event, make sure that you've thought about getting a hashtag for it, so people know where to post messages. Where people come to look for messages from you, they know where to follow for updates. It just makes life a whole lot easier if you've tagged your event and people know where to come and look to get information about that event. This is the Met used Flickr to host all of their images that they needed identifying after the riots. As you can imagine, the riots really presented us with a huge challenge because most people were videoing what was going on. We got lots of offers from the public to say, I want to help identify people. Lots of offers from the public to say, I took a photograph of a rioter, what do you want me to do with it? And what the Met did was they used Flickr to host all of the photographs, and they've used that evidentially to identify the people who were involved in the riots. So really good idea if you're planning this type of event where you think there might be some disorder, to give some thought as to where you're going to want to host the images, because people want to help you and they want a platform to be able to host their images when they're helping you. Okay, so become the trusted voice. This came out of a HMIC report into the riots. HMIC are the Inspectorate of Constabulary in the UK, and they basically said police are not trusted on social media. We don't use social media. We don't, we don't occupy the the places that people expect us to, and therefore nobody trusts the police when you pop up during the course of a disorder or an event, because they just haven't had that experience of you. So really important that you do use social media, and equally that's true of any organisation that needs people to listen to them during an emergency situation. You can't just pop up on the day and say, hello, you've got to believe me, honest gov. People want to know you before that. Make some friends. So wherever your event is, find out who your big social media users are and start talking to them, engage them, so that they will, on the day of your event, they will stand up for you and authenticate your voice. They'll carry a message. Because believe it or not everybody trusts the police, not everybody wants to follow the police, but they might follow a local blog, or they might follow the local football team, or they might follow the local university, or whatever it is. Those big groups who are followed by big groups of people. We've got Wolverhampton Wanderers, which used to be a Premiership football team in Wales, and that they've carried messages for us during the riots. The local authority carried messages for us. So that's all well and good, providing you put those links in place beforehand. You can't expect just to pop up on the day again and say, can you do this for us? And that's just another example of that. That's a hyperlocal site that carried out messages throughout the disorder, and they did that because we were running a sergeant's blog for them in normal time, and so they were happy to carry out messages during the disorder. Right, this is going to go wrong. I promise you, I've been doing this for a while now, and it goes wrong. And particularly when you involve police officers in any kind of technology, it's going to go doubly wrong. So this is a really good example, I think, of where a police force got it wrong. They acknowledged they got it wrong, and they did something about it. Because you're going to post stuff that's going to upset people. It's heat of the moment stuff. You need to have a view with regards to what you're going to do if that happens. So GMP, Greater Manchester Police, they posted that message, which is a mum of two, not involved in the disorder, jailed for 5 months for accepting shorts looted from the shops. There are no excuses. Now, the feedback that they got immediately about that was, well, who do you think you are to be saying things like that? That's a mum who's now deprived, of looking after her children. It's a pair of shorts. And who are you to say there are no excuses? That sounds like you're judge and jury. That's not a great message for the police to be sending. So GMP, because they monitor their accounts, they realised quickly that had gone wrong for them. And they posted an apology. Now, two things about this. Firstly, you've got to have somebody who's empowered on behalf of your organisation to apologise. Because, if you haven't, if you've got to make 15 phone calls to get to a chief executive before you can post an apology, it's going to go wrong. So who in your organisation is empowered to make those kind of decisions, and how accessible are they to you? And if you're going to be using Twitter and lifetime communications to get your messages out, you need to have thought that through. If it goes wrong, who's going to apologise, and are they empowered to do it? GMP apologised straight away. Apologies for any offence caused, not directed at any individual person. They followed that up with a series of other messages. Thanks for the feedback. All your comments have been noted. You're right, it's not our place to comment on sentences. So they acknowledged they got it wrong. They apologised, and they kept on acknowledging and apologising. And that took the heat out of that situation. They didn't end up on the front of the Daily Mail. They, and that was really well received by a lot of the people who complained that actually they'd been listened to, that they'd apologised, they'd taken the tweet down, and that actually acted on the feedback that the people who were listening gave them. Okay, links between new and old media. As I said, when I was tweeting during the disorder, Sky were posting my tweets as banner headlines, which was okay. That's fine. It was my voice. What we hadn't accounted for was an organisation called Sangat Television, who, to be honest, I'm not sure we knew existed, but they are a local broadcaster. They broadcast to a specific community in a foreign language. I think that it's a Punjabi-speaking police station in the West Midlands area, and they've got a Sky platform, and they talk to a specific community. And on the day of the riots, they got a camera and they were driving around the West Midlands, videoing what was going on, posting clips of police officers and riots and that kind of thing, totally beyond our control and our knowledge, to be honest with you. We became aware through social media and we engaged with them, but you can see again how that could go quite badly wrong if you're not even aware that these people are broadcasting. So I would advise you, whichever area you're in or whichever area you are looking to host an event in, just have a look at who some of the less obvious broadcasters and who some of the less obvious communicators are, so that you don't get taken by surprise, because they were posting, you know, our tweets, they were posting a lot of our messages, but we weren't in any way communicating with them. And the last slide is about police culture, and you may recognise this, you'll certainly recognise it if you're in the police force, you may recognise it in your organisation. The triangle on the left represents the police. It's a very hierarchical structure. The chief constable is in charge, and then we've got assistant chief constables, so superintendents, chief inspectors, and you know, it's very pyramid structure. So the people who make the decisions are the chief officers right at the top of the organisation, all of whom, by nature of them being chief officers, are a little bit older than your average catchment for prolific social media users. And actually the people who really understand this, the people who have grown up with it, tend to be at the bottom of the organisation, but with no voice and no ability to influence the organisation. Cisco use their new interns, their new recruits, to teach their directors about social media, which is probably the right way around. So whatever your organisation is, you know, you'll probably find that your new entrants to your organisation will have a great knowledge about it than your decision makers. So your decision makers need to listen to the people who actually understand the concept. I've had you know, real fun talking to chief constables about tweeting and you know these kind of things. That it's not their natural hunting ground, to be honest with you. So you know, you need to be able to make sure that whoever's at the top of the organisation is influenced by the people who actually understand the technology. Okay, and that's me. Any questions?